Hey everyone, Kelsey the Counselor here, and today I'm going to talk all about narcissism. I must be transparent, this is a concept that was actually quite confusing to me for some while. It's not the one I had clients coming in saying that their partner or a person in their life was a narcissist that I didn't believe them. I 100% believed them. I just knew that I didn't intuitively understand the concept. It wasn't something I have been exposed to personally in my life, and on the degree of if we have narcissism over here and we have high empathy over here, I tend to be closer to this side. So intentionally trying to cause harm, be mean, manipulate, or control someone weren't things that intuitively made sense to me. And recently I've come to interact with somebody who seems to have narcissistic tendencies. And it's been a huge learning curve for me. It's been really challenging in lots of ways, as I'm sure you all know if you're interacting with people like that in your life as well. But doing a deep dive into research gave me a lot of insights and a lot of things that I found really helpful. So I want to do a 3-part series on narcissism. So today we're going to talk about what a narcissist is, what narcissism is. If this is helpful in any way, please hit that subscribe button. I would love for you to join us and be notified anytime we have new videos presented that are helpful for you. Pop a note down below. I'd love to see your comments. And always you can message me, kelseythecounselor.com. And I'd love to hear from you if there's anything interesting that you would like to know about, anything you think would be helpful, and I'd love to do a group on that. So we're going to start with talking about narcissism and what exactly it is. A big telltale sign, I'm getting my amazing Mr. Sketch markers out here for a little bit of fun. The biggest telltale sign of narcissism is actually somebody who doesn't experience empathy. Now, those of you who might have Psychology 101 under your belt or even more knowledge, maybe you did a psychology major or minor, might go, hey, Kelsey, isn't that also the sign of a sociopath? Definitely when somebody is a sociopath, it means that they can't feel empathy. So this is a trait of someone who has narcissism. But one of the big differences is that sometimes they can actually seem to present as if they do have empathy. Now, the interesting thing is this often is not genuine, and in fact is something that they do in order to recalibrate their position of control in the situation, or get more what we call narcissistic supply. If you think of narcissistic supply as the fuel that feeds somebody who has narcissism, when they're a little bit low on their narcissistic supply, they might be akin to undernourished. And so they need to get a little bit more to regain their position, to regain their power and control. And so they are able to present as if they have empathy. It's just not genuine in the way that other people that are not narcissistic might understand it. It's not me understanding you because I care and I value you. It's me trying to present as if I understand you to ensure that then you're on my team, you feel heard, and then I can kind of regain my position of power in the relationship. Now, there are a whole bunch of different types of narcissists, and I won't be able to get into that a lot today. The big ones that I want to talk about are the overt and covert narcissists. Now, often when we think about somebody who is narcissistic, we think about someone who's overtly narcissistic. This means they have to have a lot of perception of status, power. They might come into the room and take over, want everyone to have eyes on them. They have the shiny watch, the shiny car, or at least they aspire to have the shiny watch and the shiny car. They might name drop, they might try to get in there and do a little bit of gossiping. So a lot of those things that we often think are associated with narcissism are overt. They also might be a bit more aggressive. They might fight or tangle with you more in an active way as opposed to a passive way. So an overt narcissist is often what we think about when we think about narcissism, and they're a little bit more easy to identify in terms of, are you a narcissist? So they're the kind of loud, verbose people that try to gather up all the attention in the room, are definitely self-centered, and sure that and aren't shameful of that or ashamed of that in any way. They definitely want people to know that they're important because they believe that they're important. Now, a covert narcissist might be a little bit harder to identify. This person definitely still thinks that they're very important and they want to be in the center of the room and have everyone's attention, but they don't grab the attention in the same way. They aren't as active or direct as an overt narcissist, and they're a little bit more passive. So this opens up this term that we hear a lot in community these days, gaslighting. I am going to do a separate YouTube video just specifically on gaslighting because it can be really confusing to identify where you're in it. I am just starting to understand what this concept means, and it's been a number of years that this person's been in my life, and I'm only just now starting to make sense of it. So covert narcissists can be a lot harder to identify. When you first meet them, you think that they're wonderful and great, and if you were to describe these behaviors to someone, it wouldn't necessarily translate and make sense. They might not believe you, not because you're not a trustworthy person, but it doesn't fit with who they see that person to be. So covert narcissistic people are perhaps less aggressive initially. They don't demand the same type of attention in the room in the way an overt narcissist does. They still believe that they're valuable and important and have lots of important information to share with everybody and want to make sure everybody knows that, but they're a little bit more covert and passive in the way that they do it, which means that it can be harder to identify and it can take a little bit longer to truly understand what is going on there. Another big important piece of narcissism, and I really want to highlight this, narcissists are wounded. They often have had a lot of childhood trauma. And I kind of explain it as, imagine this person that's sitting in the middle of a castle and they have tons, an empty castle, and they have tons of guards around them, and they have a moat, and they have alligators in the moat, and they have a drawbridge, and they have land, and they have more army around on the land. They are completely protected. Now, imagine this takes up, I don't know, 10 acres, and that little person sitting in the middle of the castle all by themselves. And I use that as an example to try to explain this woundedness because it's so significant. That person is protecting their wounds so greatly that no one ever really gets to know who they are. There's so much effort in going into protecting who they are that you never really get to truly connect with who they are because it's too painful for them. There's lots of lack of self-esteem, lots of feelings of insignificance, not being worthy, not being good enough. They're deeply wounded people. And the wound is as significant as the reaction is. So if I am 10 gigabytes of wounded, I'm going to be 10 gigabytes loud about being an amazing person because I need to prove to myself and prove to the world that I'm not actually this wounded person. So if you can imagine this person sitting in this castle, the amount of protection they have created in order to keep their wounds safe and not to feel their pain are significant. Now, this doesn't mean that it justifies their behavior. I believe fully that it is not always, we don't get to choose the wounds that we come into the world with. However, or we gain while we're here. However, I do believe it's our responsibility to heal them. And this is another telltale sign of someone who's a narcissist. They don't do self-inquiry, they don't do self-reflection because it's too painful. If they were to do that at all, it would make their foundation so wiggly that their wounds would become open and they would be so much pain in there that they might have to explore, think about, or touch, or feel. It's not worth it. And so it's better and safer for them to build this castle and this moat and these armies around them to protect them. Even if it means that they don't have a lot of connection or deep relationships in their lives, another indication of someone who has narcissistic tendencies, it's safer for them to keep people away and not feel pain than to do any self-reflection in the way that maybe it would bring people closer, because that self-reflection is just so painful for them. Again, I'm not justifying the actions. I believe that wounded people wound others and that it is our responsibility to do our healing. And if you're like me, holy smokes, it's not pretty, is it? It's deep, it's painful, it's really challenging, but in doing it, we get to release that which we're kind of prisoned around with, and we get to become who we really know that we are. So I did mention a couple of things. I mentioned the woundedness. I mentioned the lack of self-reflection. And I mentioned the difficulty with relationships. There are a lot of other features that are indicative of somebody who's narcissistic as well. Definitely being self-centered, not being able to see outside of themselves, not being able to see how they're impacting another person. And this is one of the pieces that makes it so challenging. How are you supposed to speak with someone honestly and genuinely when they can't even see outside of their own perception or reality? And often they make things all about them. And that means maybe intentionally, but often it's subconsciously as well. And this is what's so challenging, is that you may say something or think something or do something that has nothing to do with them, but in their worldview, everything comes back to being about them. So if you are wondering if you are in some kind of relationship with somebody, no matter if that's relationship romantic or platonic, who might have narcissistic tendencies, definitely this is some of the things that you might want to keep an eye for. It doesn't mean that they're evil, bad people. I want to be really clear about that. I think in our society, we've come to think narcissism bad. I don't want to have anything to do with them. The reality is they are deeply wounded, and a really big way that we can protect ourselves when we're interacting with them is setting clear boundaries and adhering to them. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in another YouTube video as well. Like I said, I'm going to do a 3-part series. And the third part is going to be all about how we can be in a relationship with those that are narcissists or have narcissistic tendencies, where we don't become wounded. Because when the narcissist throws an arrow at us or a dagger at us, whatever it hits, whatever wound we feel coming up for us, whether it's anger, injustice, whether I collapse and I kind of give in to them because I'm too scared about conflict, that gives us a lot of insight into what work we need to do and how we can grow. So there's a way that narcissists can actually be our teacher. We just need to be really mindful that we're boundaried and keeping ourselves safe if we're interacting with them in any kind of way. And again, there's other things to consider, that if there's violence involved, what type of violence, if there's abuse going on, those things are things that we don't want to become in relationship with people that might be abusive towards us. But if someone is just experiencing narcissistic tendencies without violence or abuse, we can have a relationship with them insofar as we are boundaried, careful, and make sure that we keep ourselves safe. I hope that this was informative to you, and feel free to check out the other YouTube videos in this series as well. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.